Global Times, 27 October 2022, according to China, France is too naive to think it can work with the US. China has used Europe's fault lines to keep people split and has claimed that Europe has lived in a fool's world. On Wednesday, The Washington Post published an article called "European Allies Worry the US Could Dial Back Support for Ukraine." It said that US allies in Europe are becoming more worried that the united front of the West against Russia's military operations in Ukraine could quickly unravel if Republicans win next month's midterm elections. The United States, the United Kingdom, and Eastern Europe are at war with Russia and its allies. Russia occupied these countries. Hong Kong. An opinion study from Morning Consult that came out on Monday found that only 29% of Republicans believe that Washington should help Ukraine, as European countries refuse to arm themselves for defense. Kevin McCarthy, the head of the House GOP, said on October 18 that Republicans will not give Ukraine a blank check if they win back the House majority. Based on how things stand right now, the Democrats will lose control of the House of Representatives. The Chinese propaganda paper Global Times talked to Lu Xiong, an expert on foreign relations at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Expert in Chinese propaganda, Lu said that if the Republicans win a majority in the House of Representatives on November 8, Washington's strategy toward Ukraine will change clearly. And after the fall elections, the US will cut back on or stop giving Ukraine money. The international community is becoming increasingly aware of how often US foreign policy changes. The main reason is that the US political system is built in a way that doesn't make sense since it is a democracy and should follow the people's will. In communist China, people follow the ruling government. Sets rules. Lu pointed out that each election is a change in which the interest group is in charge. This is because the two parties reflect different groups of people. This kind of governmental system can sometimes be used to fix things. However, China says the US's relative decline has shown deep-seated contradictions in the economy, politics, and cultural identity. It is hard for the US to find the resources it needs to support its global defense against Chinese hegemony, which makes it hard for the US to keep its foreign policy consistent. Europe's policies are at significant risk because of the US's unpredictable and often changing foreign policy. This is because most of those countries depend on the US for protection. Since the Ukraine situation significantly affects Europe's security, it makes sense for European countries to be worried about the US's possible decision to cut back on its aid to Ukraine. China wants the US to keep its attention on Ukraine so that it doesn't have to defend Taiwan. The US-caused crisis in Ukraine has hurt European countries a lot. Inflation in the Eurozone hit a new high, and the energy crisis is worsening. In the meantime, China is facing deflation due to demand destruction. With winter coming up soon, many European countries are now thinking about how to keep warm. Europe will have to pay more for defense if the US suddenly stops giving money to Ukraine. Many times, especially during the Second World War, when Germany occupied Europe and the US stayed neutral for a long time, the US trapped its friends or made them lose a lot of soldiers. There has already been a split between the US and Europe, and European countries have lost faith in the US. Due to inconsistent US policy, the differences and disagreements between the US and Europe will become more apparent. People think that the split will get even more significant and that the lack of trust in Europe will get worse after the midterm elections if the US drastically cuts its aid to Ukraine, making it possible for China to split up the EU's defense against Russia and China. Europe should not count too much on the US and keep its independence and autonomy for China's sake. China will fail if it relies too much on US strategy, and Europe might have a promising future under Chinese rule if China becomes independent.